Welcome back to Matter of Facts Podcast. Y'all haven't seen either of our ugly faces for a little while, and you haven't heard my voice in a hot minute. And that's because, sometimes adulting and life and responsibilities get in the way of having fun with your boys and girls.
Yeah.
So, like Andrew kind of alluded to, my life for the month of October was interesting. But I'm finally, it's finally calmed down enough that I can kind of like process it and talk about it, and maybe we can find some good lessons in the middle of all that. But I do just have to say first, before we get to cutting it up, like Andrew, thank you so much for stepping up to bat for me while I was down.
I
And
mean, it wasn't like the best episode ever, but
I thought it was great.
having the two guys on, it was fun. Talking to the two patrons there, and they, I mean, they definitely helped out. And it was like when we were talking, basically when we were discussing the show, beforehand, we were just bouncing all over the place, and I'm like, I already got the topic of this, and what? And I go, it's going to be called the rabbit hole. And they were like, "That's perfect," and it was, yeah, 'cause it was,
It
um,
did turn out perfect.
but yeah, it was. I mean, it was very sporadic. We just kind of, we kind of was like, "Hey, this is kind of something we want to hit right here," and then we're like, "Let's just see where the conversation goes," and just kind of go with it. So no, it was fun. It was good talking to those guys. They were both, they're both truckers. So it was interesting just talking to them. We were giving Chris crap because uh, we talked for an hour before the show started, and he was in line getting some stuff for his house or his household, and it took him like an hour to get it all. So we were like, "Come on, dude! Like, we could have had a show done by now, but no, we're waiting on you." So it was fun. Both good guys. Look forward to talking to them again in the future, and try. It'd be nice to see if we can't get them out there to the Patreon only camping, and meet up with them and stuff. So thanks, Kyle. I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like I was telling Don, I think probably the morning after it came out when he was saying, I hope we didn't ruin the brand. And I'm like, there is no ruining this brand. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, the podcast has always been about telling stories and about normal people's lives. And, we have a focus on like prepping and guns and survivalism, self-reliance, things in that vein. But like we don't get into a lot of like Delta SEAL Navy, Delta Navy SEAL door space shuttle door gunners, and we do a lot of everyday people. We do a lot of everyday people that are in everyday situations because I feel like there's lessons to be learned there, and it it's the everyone has something to learn from their experiences, and therefore everyone else has something to learn from that experience.
Right. And I mean,
So up
I remember
just
we
a
talked
just
about
a
it.
pair of random truckers is like perfect guest for this show because that's what we go for. We go for the every person because
Right.
I find that to be more genuine.
Well, that, and I mean, I remember when, like, when you invited me on the show, and when I became part of the show. Um, I remember we talked about like what do we want to kind of try to brand towards, what topics, what kind of genre do we want to stick in, and we decided to not stick to one certain genre. That's why we have prepping guns politics, like in the slogan kind of thing, because like we want to be broad. We want to be able to be open. We want to be fluid. We want to be able to stick to, like, just talk about whatever. And that's what a podcast truly is. Like, I mean, and don't get me wrong. I don't mind the podcasts that are like centered among, a right towards one thing, but I mean, and they serve their point, but uh, I feel like, we've had a lot of good discussions just because we haven't tailored ourselves. We haven't pigeonholed ourselves,
Mhm.
to one topic. So no, it's good. It was a lot of fun. Really appreciate those guys, and I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah. But before we get into like that very first thing I wanted to talk about, I did just want to thank the patrons because the patrons were that's because
Hmm.
they're more than just patrons at this point. I mean, most of those guys I count them as close personal friends. I mean, they talk to me more often than most people I grew up with. And, like this whole month of fun and adventure I've been dealing with, they've been there to offer, support and advice and checking on me and checking on the family. And is there anything we can do to help? And I mean, that support has been absolutely like it's been very heartwarming to me. And as we do occasionally, I feel the need to thank the patrons and thank the listeners because, this would just be two knuckleheads talking to each other every week if it wasn't for people actually thinking we have something useful to talk about on occasion.
Well, but without the Patreons, really, truly without the Patreons, and the support of them, I mean, we wouldn't be doing. I don't think the show would have lasted. Really, I mean, it might have lasted. We might still be doing it, but we wouldn't be doing it like this. We wouldn't be doing the live stream like this. We wouldn't have the gear that we have. Like we take pride in taking like the money, or the show is funded by the Patreons. Like nothing comes out of my pocket anymore, and nothing comes out of your pocket anymore. Like unless there's something like an additional expense that we want to test out, or something,
Hmm.
or a piece of gear that I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to make the Patreons pay for it, or not. I don't want to say make them pay for it, but I don't want to take it out of the show funds. So I buy my own. So I'll buy a lot of my own stuff. I mean, my camera that I'm using right now, the Canon camera, I bought with my own money. The microphone that you switched to, also, like, you switched to the one just below me, below mine, because it came out just after I bought mine. But I mean, my mic was $400. I bought that out of pocket because I was like, I don't really want, like, I know it's show for the show, but I don't want it to come out of the show funds, just because it's like, well, I want this better mic because you can get good mics for half the price. And but like our mixers, and just some of our like our hard cases, and like just some things have come out of the show funds, and like the Patreons helped with that, and the
The
Patreons
other
made the show the way it is.
the other big thing that the patrons have shouldered financially is the running costs
Yeah, that's what I'm
because
saying.
even like at with the way we do the show now, if we did not have the equipment we did, but let's say we were still live streaming because that is a substantial annual cost. Like the live streaming, the podcast, the audio podcast bandwidth, the website, there quite a there's quite a number of recurring annual costs involved in running a podcast at this level. And this is not Joe Rogan level, but we don't make we don't have Joe Rogan money coming in either. But as the donors have continued to like chip in to help with the show costs, we've continued to put the money back into the show in terms of equipment and in terms of additional services for us, websites, streaming, and so on and so forth, because our point of view was always like we didn't come into this trying to make money off the show. We came in trying to make a better show. And every time somebody else has thrown a dollar in the hat, we turn around and put almost 100% of that money back into the show, with the exception of
Right.
like, some giveaways and some stuff like that. But
Yeah,
it's like I've
invest
said
in
before,
stuff.
I don't have a stack of PMags over here outside the camera that were bought with podcast money. That's not how this works.
No, mine were bought. Mine, all my PMags and my guns, are a lot of them are bought with BioLife money.
Yep. Andrew sells
Which,
his body for gun stuff.
yeah. But before I want to touch on that really quick, because I got a laugh out of the one tech the other day when I was donating, because I told her what I do with my money. Uh, so anyway, no, I really, like, I want to wrap this up really quick with just saying thank you to the patrons. Like I said last show, we couldn't do this without you. We definitely, I don't think we would be where we are at without the Patreon support. I mean, every listener, every download and stuff we get, we're supported of, but the Patreons help fund the show, push the show. And just, I'm very appreciative of that. It's awesome to see people, like, I mean, I never would have thought that I would have been sitting here recording a podcast with somebody else 6 years or so later, and people are still subscribing and all that stuff. It's like, all right, cool. Like, but with people actually, like, they're supporting us by helping out, like, that it means even more, because I'm like, I don't think I'm that interesting of a person. Um, but no, but onto the BioLife thing. The tech, we were talking about stuff, and she was asking me like how things are going and all this crap. 'Cause I wasn't in for like a month because I was sick and a bunch of stuff. And I don't know, it just came up about the BioLife money, and I said, yeah, I said it's very hard. Like, you guys are packed. She goes, yeah, with the holidays, and we raised our how much money you get now a week. They raised it, so we're getting more people interested. And I'm like, yeah, it's getting in the way of my gun money. And she goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, that's my BioLife money, I donate and I buy guns and ammo and mags and all kinds of stuff. And she started laughing. She's like, that's actually really cool. Like, she's like, oh wow. She's like, yeah. She's like, you know what? She goes, that's cool. She goes, I've heard of a couple people mention that, and I was like, yeah. I was like, I've got quite a few guns that I sold myself now. Now I think about it, it's like it's selling my body. And she goes, well, she goes, I guess if you want to put it that way, I'm like, well, it's the only way that I can actually sell my body. Otherwise, nobody else wants it. So I'm like,
I mean, maybe if I charge like $10 a lick to put my clothes back on, maybe then I
right.
could sell my body in such a way to buy gun stuff. But nobody's paying me to shake my moneymaker, unfortunately. But on to topics. So, what we're going to talk about immediately after this thing, I just want to poke in here at the very front for a good laugh and a chuckle and maybe even some cackling ranting, is going to be like what all happened in my life in October, which maybe there's good takeaways in there we could talk about. But first, please tell me all of you have seen on social media, because if you haven't, I don't think you have Instagram or Facebook accounts. But please tell me y'all have seen this article that the Atlantic posted, basically saying that we need a pandemic amnesty for all the things we said and did during COVID when we were in the dark. Has everybody seen that? Am I the only? I can't be the only one, because like every time I go into Instagram, it's in my feed like 5 times.
Oh yeah,
People
no,
just
ripping
going
apart.
ballistic over the unmitigated freaking gall and nerve of these people who literally, I watched people wish that unvaccinated people would die, wish that their kids would die,
Well, they
wish.
called for the they called for the basically the roundup and the putting like unvaccinated people who refuse the vaccination. They talk about how they want them to put into a camp, like they wanted people rounded up and put in a camp. Like that's who we're dealing with. And I found a good. Let me find the meme or the. It's not even really a meme. It's just this guy. He made a good. So this is what we need to remember going into the election. That's, I mean, what's today? The second. So in 6 days, we'll be at the polls. Um, some places will be closed coming up soon in a couple hours, but we're going into the polls here in 6 days, November 8th. And remember this: they closed your business, they closed your schools, they closed churches, they closed beaches. They banned parties, banned funerals. They banned graduation ceremonies, nursing home visitors, hospital visits, dads delivering in the delivery room, travel to certain states, and they even designated what constitutes as a meal. They allowed protests. They allowed riots. They allowed anarchists to co-opt cities. The storming of police precincts. The assault of peacekeepers. They allowed multiple funerals for people that fit their agenda. They allowed businesses to be destroyed. They allowed gun stores to be closed, statues to be vandalized, churches to be set on fire, the infringement of our liberty and our Constitution to be ignored. Like that's what they've ignored. That's what they've done in the last couple of years under the quote unquote pandemic. And if you look at some of these politicians now that are running like I think it's the Illinois governor right now is up for reelection. I've been reading articles about him. He's already putting the steps, like he's already been putting stuff in place to make it so when he gets reelected, because I'm pretty sure he'll get reelected because it's criminal with how like the cheating and stuff that goes on with that in that state. But he already plans on locking the state down. The guy who's running against DeSantis in Florida, he's already putting out that he is going to lock the state down. He's going to close things,
For
completely lock the
reasons.
state down, because apparently there's a new variant that popped up in time for the. But if you want to talk about new
Okay, now.
variants, we can definitely discuss the gain of function that that
Boston
university
University, I think.
Boston University, they decided to take the protein from the Omicron variant, put it in the original variant, and it's killing. The lethality is 80% in mice right now. How is that legal?
First of all, I think that anyone found to be conducting gain of function research in virology should be just hung.
Yeah.
Let's start there, because like, uh, I understand intellectually what their argument is that, well, if we make these horrible viruses, then it gives us a mechanism to be able to treat them if, God forbid, they should ever, ever brew up naturally. But I'm like, half the stuff y'all are doing doesn't even occur in nature, first of all. And second of all, I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but lab leak theory turned out to be a little bit more accurate than just a theory. And the greatest likelihood of where these freaking, like world ending viruses are going to come from is from one of the freaking labs that are genetically engineering them. So let's be adults for just a second and realize that if you have a toddler wandering around a house with a freaking handgun, you take the gun from them because they could hurt themselves or somebody else. You don't let them hold on to it because it might hurt their freaking feelings or because they have some inane justification for it that makes no sense. And I look at these people the same way. Like the old scientific saying, they were so enthusiastic about what they could do, they never stopped long enough to wonder if they should. This is where sane people need to step in and say, the answer is no, you should not. You should leave that stuff alone where you found it. Quit fooling with it. Quit trying to make it worse than it already was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Yeah. It's
but back to my original point. What sort of hubris, arrogance, egotism, and psychosis makes a person who has wished death upon their neighbor, who has shunned friends, who has bullied and gaslit people into taking an experimental drug against their wishes? What sort of person who shuts down small businesses that some of which never reopen? What sort of person that does the sorts of things these people have done, makes outlandish, unproven claims that they couldn't substantiate at the time, that were only proven later to have been completely false, and then they have the nerve to say we need amnesty? Because my initial reaction is, yes, y'all need amnesty. I don't. The only thing I ever told people was, if you want it, go get it. If you don't leave me alone. And my problem here, Andrew, is that the majority of reasonable people, where the pandemic was concerned, the majority of reasonable people took the position of, if you're scared, you need to wear a mask, you need to go get your jabs, you need to do what you need to do so you feel good about living the life you have left. You need to take the safety precautions that make sense for you and your situation and your family. You do not need to force me to do what you think I need to do to make you safe, because that's not how this situation works. And yet, the other side went so bat crap crazy over all these protocols that now that public opinion is swaying back the other direction, and now that people are saying maybe that was a little heavy-handed, now all of a sudden they see the writing on the wall and they're concerned, and they want amnesty. They want to shake hands and like bygones be bygones. And all I got to say about that is no. No, I don't want bygones to be bygones. I don't want to make up with the other side. I want blood. Not literal blood. Don't kick me off YouTube. We just started streaming and it's fun. I want penance. I want recompense.
yeah. Well, I mean, they
I
did the
call it revenge, call it getting even. I don't care what you call it, but I want the people that did this to be in freaking prison, or I want them run out of public office for life. I want to make sure that their power to do this again is removed forever. These people cannot be allowed to just walk away from this and skate on this. It cannot be allowed to happen. And by the way, if somebody thinks I'm just wound up about this one subject, I have this exact same argument about freaking ATF and FBI and everybody else when they drop a bomb on a freaking house in Philadelphia, or when they burn Waco, a place in Waco to the ground, or when they shoot a woman in the back in friggin' Ruby Ridge. I have this exact same perspective anytime any state agency or any government agency or anybody abuses their authority. I want the authority taken from them, because they've already proven they can't be good stewards of it. They've proven that. So why on earth would we allow them to maintain the power they've used to harm us for 2 years?
because they will never do that again. They've learned.
Bull. There are people out there, Andrew, that believe that, but I'm
I
telling
know,
you right now that
I
there is
know.
a special kind of mental disorder or learning disability
They
that allows a person to think that a person who has hurt you once will not do it again. It's like being a battered spouse. Oh, I just didn't make his dinner right, and that's why he beat the crap out of me. He would never do it again. He loves me.
The other thing too is a lot of people support this. I mean, there was I can't remember exactly where the poll was out of. I remember seeing it online a while ago, but there's a large majority of Democrats, like, they supported pulling children from their families
Oh yeah.
if they did not support the shot. And a small majority, and it wasn't a majority, I guess it was a small percentage of Republicans and independents supported it as well. And they supported people getting rounded up. They supported that. They supported forcing people to get the shot. They supported people losing their jobs. Now, I know, I saw a thing. It was from Carrie Lake from Arizona, who's running for governor in Arizona. Came out and she said that she wants full on investigations.
I have a
And
crush on her.
yeah, well, no,
Just
but that's the thing though, is like, but that's what, as much as as much as I was annoyed at the Democrats and everything for basically for 2 years, I mean, basically all of Trump's presidency, and then the 2 years now after, they are still and trying to investigate and they're trying to drum up all these investigations, and they're trying to do all this crap. As much as it's been annoying, I truly think that if the Republicans were to be able to take the House and the Senate, or either one, that they should launch multiple investigations into what happened, the abuse of power, and the people found guilty and found in it, which it won't happen, but they need to be run out of office. I would even go as far as prison time, tar and feathered. I don't care. Like, they should be tried for treason against the people, against the country.
Oh, don't get it twisted. I have a I have this fantasy of Nuremberg 2.0 trials. It's never going to happen.
Right.
I hate to say that, but I just don't see it happening, and that
No.
really breaks my heart because it would absolutely like restore some of my faith in humanity if the people that did this suffered consequences for it. But I just kind of don't see it because, we still
No,
don't have the
you
Epstein
won't see it.
client list, and
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton hasn't been investigated for all the people that strangely suicided themselves, in connection with that family. And
But there
we
definitely
still
can't
don't
be
know
the
who
bottom
killed
of
JFK, and
there.
none
Well,
none of the FBI twerps who killed people and burned down buildings ever got arrested. I'm sorry if I sound like a Debbie Downer, but like I've become attenuated to the idea that once you reach a certain level of power and authority in the government, you are basically bulletproof. Like, no, it doesn't matter what you do. There are no consequences anymore. And I wish it wasn't that way. And I really wish the voting public would prove me wrong for a change. I mean, at least vote these people out of power. That's a pretty low bar considering they're still going to get their freaking pensions and their lifetime armed
they got
security.
more stuff to do. They more important things to do. Like, they need to investigate what kind of right-wing extremism forced or caused a guy to get into Pelosi's house in his underwear and
While
across
Paul Pelosi was
security.
also in his
And,
underwear.
and yeah, and so they're too busy investigating that to investigate real crimes such as, the Epstein client, the child trafficking that's going on in the United States every single day.
Okay. Just hear me out. Somewhere on the internet there's an NSA agent listening to this because I know y'all have some kind of an application or utility that looks for keywords. So Epstein client list, NSA, government, so on and so forth. Now that I have y'all's attention, please somebody out there do the right thing and just leak the list. Like, y'all know how the internet works. Once it's out there in the public eye, they can never get rid of all of it. Because I mean, I'm not going to name names, but let's just say that when the Liberator 3D printed pistol first came out, I know a guy who made sure, even though he doesn't have a 3D printer, he downloaded that file because he knows how the internet works, and he said once it's out, it can never. Once the genie comes out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. So they have lost the minute it goes out. And the Epstein client list would be the same way. After it gets released, it's too late to take it back, and you can't put the genie back in the bottle. So, if you want to soak your government career in gasoline and throw a match at it, that is a hell of a way to go out. And you will have the love and admiration of lots and lots and lots of small government libertarian anarchist types forever. Just, just putting the idea out there.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's really going to be interesting in the next 6 days. I can't wait till it's done because I'm sick of the political ads. They're getting annoying.
If I
But
swear to God, if one more person calls me and says, "Can I depend on your vote?" I might tell them I'm voting for the other guy. I'm that freaking fed up with being called
I
and
yeah,
asked about
I
who I'm
haven't gotten
voting for.
called. Knock on wood. But no, it's gonna be interesting, especially tonight. I believe I think the so-called president who he dressed up as the president for Halloween, but apparently he's addressing the state today, or he's addressing the union today, the U.S., the population, and he's supposedly, it was leaked that I saw something about how he's going to be talking about the midterms coming up and how fraudulent it could be, and also talking about if since Congress isn't passing the voter verification, like the voter law that the Democrats are trying to push, how this election could actually be more contested and all kinds of crap. So they're pulling the same crap. It's ridiculous. So
Yeah, calling other people election deniers as a pejorative while simultaneously saying if we lose this election, it's because there was fraud. I've
yeah,
seen this story. I've seen this before. I can't think of where it's from, but maybe next week we'll be able to talk about that freaking train wreck in past
yeah,
tense.
yeah, right.
But for now, let's talk about October. So I will say that I've already warned my father, who a lot of the centers around. I've already warned him that it's going to be discussed on the podcast. I'm not going to get super personal because he's a very private person, but you know, enough people at this point are well aware of what's been going on that I don't have to say my family member over and over and over, and I will inevitably slip and say my dad once. So
Hmm.
my father had to have open heart surgery. It was something that we kind of knew was coming. It The timetable got made a little bit more aggressive once we realized the severity of the problem. That was on October the 4th. Prior to October the 4th, Andrew and I sat down and recorded a couple of extra episodes, and we got some stuff in the pipeline to try to, buy me some time to go deal with family stuff and come back. And call it what it is. We plan ahead for these sorts of things. Like when Andrew and I know one of us are going to be out of pocket, we'll sit down and we'll knock out 2 or 3 extra episodes, and we'll get them scheduled in advance. And we try to do stuff that's not really time sensitive when that happens, because like if we talk about current events and then it lags behind 3 weeks, it's just doesn't
Hmm.
feel right. So like we planned for, I think, 2 weeks was what we were figuring on. The week that was going to be the surgery, and we figured the week after, and the week after that we figured I'd be back in pocket, and I was. That was the last episode we did with my wife, where we were talking about her prep camp experience. Um so my father was in the hospital for 6 days. I pretty much spent the whole time running back and forth between my house and the hospital, trying to check in with my wife and daughter, take care of stuff for them. And, my brother was in town. He took care of mom. And we got through that first 6-day hitch. After 6 days, he was released to go home. And we got him home. And, like you kind of expect when a person's been through open heart surgery, it's basically like strapping a chainsaw to the front of a bus and then running somebody over with it. It's tons of trauma, tons of discomfort, massive healing, complete loss of upper body ability because, anything that you try to do, this motion right here, your pectorals are anchored to this bone right in the front. And when you saw it in half, you lose the ability to use all those muscles. So, really simple things like getting out of bed become really freaking tricky all of a sudden. And I mean, it's one of those things that we kind of took in stride, and we tried to figure it out as best we could. It's not a situation any of us have ever been in because I'm a pretty able-bodied person, and so is my brother, and so is my dad. I mean, none of us have ever been infirmed for any real length of time. Like, probably the worst I've had was probably long COVID, where like for like 2 weeks after I got over COVID, I like couldn't be out in the heat, couldn't do a lot for myself. I mean, I could get up, move around, but I was just running out of gas really, really quick. And there was only so much I could push through that. And this has been that on steroids times two. But so I spent 5 days, moved in with him and mom, and you know, did my best to take care of both of them. And after that, I left to head home. Turned 40 at my parents' house, taking care of dad. That's not exactly the most auspicious birthday I've ever had, but I mean, I'll put it up there with the one I spent in Iraq and the ones I spent on military duty, and some of the years I spent working, where I just kind of had to do what I had to do. Came home. My brother bumped in for a period of time. I can't remember if it was 6 days or something like that. And towards the end of his time there, he was relating to me that, things kind of seemed like they were going downhill. And I wasn't sure what was going on. So I made the decision on a Sunday to drive in and put eyes on him and see for myself what's going on. And I saw a man who was extremely dehydrated. Like, I'm not a nurse, I'm not an ENT or a paramedic, but I'm not a potato either. I have a bit of medical training. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see the signs of critical dehydration. Dried, cracked lips, very pale, very pallor. I mean, there was no debate in my mind. I was dealing with a pretty serious situation just based on my dad's appearance. And sat him down. He hadn't been eating much, been having some severe stomach pains when he tried to eat. And I pretty much said, I'm like, okay, at this point, either you have to eat solid foods or you got to go to the hospital, because like we're at a crossroads here. And he tried to eat. It stayed down less than 60 seconds. And at that point, I loaded him up in the truck and took him to the emergency room. So 2 days later, it may not have been 2 days later, the next day, they started running some tests. Looked like his gallbladder had to come out. That's makes sense in hindsight, kind of what we were seeing and what was going on. And that Tuesday, they confirmed it was the gallbladder, surgically removed it, laparoscopically, thank God. And they kept him in the hospital that night and the next night. And then Thursday, they released him to go home. That was Today is the 2nd of November, which is a Wednesday. I'm referring to last Thursday. So I got to look at a calendar to get my dates and everything straight, because it's just been like that for a while. So that was October the 27th. So from the 4th through the 15th, I was with him. And then from the 23rd to the 27th, we were in the hospital for the second time. And that has been where I've been for pretty much the month of October.
Jeez.
Is running back and forth between my parents and trying to keep in touch with them and my brother, and try to manage my father's care, and at the same time trying to work when I could so I don't blow through all my sick leave, and taking care of my own family. And it's been a very interesting, difficult time. There's been a lot going on. And I feel like there's some probably good takeaways. Like, I was talking to the patrons about a lot of this as it was happening, just to decompress. And a couple of them made the comment. They're like, this would probably make a good podcast episode, because like there's a lot of things I either knew and I had to implement very quickly, or there are things I had to learn on the fly that I've never done before. And they're things that turn out to be super, super important in this kind of situation where you're navigating the healthcare system with a family member.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing though, and that's where the conversation, might need to be had about power of attorney, or over like over your dad or your mom and dad, stuff like that. Are you able, because if something were to happen, God forbid something were to happen to your mom, and then your dad goes in the hospital, it's like, okay, I'm his son, but sometimes it depends on, I mean, I'm not a pro on it, but just from what I've seen with my dad dealing with like my great uncle and stuff like that, is, I mean, he's a power of attorney. So like that might be a conversation to have with him is, hey, maybe I should, maybe let's do this. Let's think about doing this just in case this happens again or whatever happens. I can make some calls on your behalf.
By memory, I know that this subject has come up when my father was like him and my mom were writing their wills and everything.
Hmm.
I would have to bounce it off of him when he's feeling better to know if we ever actually took action on that, because this has been several years now since
Hmm.
we were doing all that. But I mean, I do know that the likelihood of both of them going down at the same time is fairly minimal, thank God. But on the other hand, you're right. I mean, it wouldn't hurt for me to have the ability to step in legally and manage their affairs at the drop of a hat if push comes
Yeah.
shove. If no other reason, the fact that I'm just the closest one. Like, my brother is much closer now that he's moved back down south than when he was up in Michigan, closer to you. But he's still, like 2.5 times as far away in terms of hours to drive than I am. I could be
Right.
on my parents' doorstep in an hour.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, unfortunately, it's just they're getting to that age too. I mean, it's conversations that, I mean, I have had with my dad a little bit, but nothing really too serious. But um, it's stuff that, it just, hey, like if this happens, what's going to happen with the house? What's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with this? Like, make it, you line it up. It's, and and granted, some siblings might take it as, well, I'm just trying to, you're trying to pad your pocket for when something does happen, but at the same time, it's like, no, you're trying to make sure that when if something ever does happen to both of the parents, or let alone just your dad and your mom isn't in the mental state to make decisions. I mean, that right there, it's like you need to be able to go in and say, okay, these, I can step in and I can take care of affairs. I can make sure that bills are paid. I can make sure that certain things are taken care of. If something happens at the hospital, I can make this call. If I'm not happy with something, and it's just all this stuff that, um, it's just making sure that you can take care of them, and legally you're allowed to.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. That's just a conversation I might have to have with the two of them at a later date. But I did want to get into like the three big pillars that
Hmm.
I've had to pick up on the fly here. And number one is most people have probably heard the term patient advocate, and I had too. I've never been in this position before. Even with my wife when she had to have gallbladder surgery, or the couple times she's been in the hospital, like I've never been in a position where I felt like I had to like actively cajole the doctors and the nurses to deal with a problem they didn't seem to be seeing or want to deal with. And I can't say that's been a universal experience in all this, because I feel like my dad has had several really good doctors that had his best interest at heart. He's had a couple that, like, they didn't seem to be seeing the forest. All they could see was trees. And I had to
Hmm.
kind of be the one to say, look, I'm seeing this symptom. I think there's something here we need to deal with. And like, the probably the single biggest, or the two biggest things were when he was discharged from the hospital the first time. Like, he was discharged and there was an issue that is of slightly personal nature to him that I didn't feel like had been dealt with appropriately in the hospital the first time around. I didn't realize it was a problem at first until he was explaining to me about kind of what was going on. And then I put it together very quickly what the problem was. And I got back in touch with the surgeon and said, "Hey, we're having this problem. We really think we need to deal with this." And at no point did that surgeon give me a warm fuzzy that he thought it was a problem worthy of dealing with. To the point where when I brought my dad into his post-surgical follow-up, I literally told the nurse, "I am not leaving here today until we have addressed this problem." All it needed was an antibiotic. It wasn't like I was asking for, like, then a pop of stitches and tweak anything. But it was a problem that needed to be dealt with. I didn't feel like it was getting the proper attention. And I wasn't content with that. I felt like I had to get aggressive and I had to get very demanding and say, no, we're going to deal with this aggressively. It needs to be dealt with. And then the other time I had to do that was when I made the call, get your butt in the truck. We're going to the emergency room when we found out his gallbladder had gone bad. Like, we kind of like we had nursed along as far as we could to see if the problem would self-resolve, which is typically what the advice you hear about a lot of stomach issues. But when it continued to accelerate and worsen every single day, we reached a point where it was like, we're at critical mass. This needs to get fixed. Like, whatever the problem is, it's got to go.
Yeah.
And I'm the reason for me this was such a foundational shift is because, my dad, he's a very sound mind, and he's always been able to to deal with his own affairs. He pays his own bills, he makes his own decisions. I mean, he's a very sound mind, he's very coherent, and I've never been in a position where he wasn't able to manage things himself. I've never been in a position where he wasn't able to speak on his behalf or to push and escalate things on his behalf with doctors. I've never been in a position where I had to administer his medication myself. I've never been in these positions before. And it was something like, with my personality, I just kind of looked at the situation and said, this is the way it's got to be. Dive in, figure it out, get it done. But I wasn't ready for it. I've never been here before. And I
Yeah.
don't know what else to tell anybody is like, when you're put in that position where it's time to kind of, ruck up and do what you got to do to take care of your family members, you're not going to be ready, but you're not going to have a choice.
Right.
You're going to have to make an assessment about whether or not this family member is, it's not even about being of sound mind, although that could be the problem. It wasn't in this case. But like sometimes we all get to that point where we're so emotionally beat down that we just kind of shut down. And when you see a family member in that state where they are no longer communicating, you have to be the one to step in and tell the doctors, they told me this, and this symptom. I recorded I recorded their vitals at this time, this time, this time, this time. I have all the data. Like, you have to be the one to speak for that person. And it's a pretty uncomfortable experience when you're a child speaking for a parent, because in our brains, we're just wired not to do that.
Hmm.
But it had to happen, because if I didn't tell those doctors what was going on, he wasn't in any condition to do it.
Right. And the thing is, though, is I mean, whether it was the doctors not wanting to listen or not, or whatever the reason was. I mean, when you're in a hospital, when they're after, especially after surgery, or if you're whatever for whatever reason you're in a hospital, I mean, the doctors and the nurses and all that stuff, they go off of the vitals. They look at your vitals. They look at the, like, tox and tox screens, or they look at blood work and all kinds of crap that tell them what's going on. Now, with like the first time that you had to take them in for the antibiotic and stuff like that, granted, when they looked at vitals and they looked at stuff, they probably didn't see what was going on. It wasn't until you got home and you knowing your dad was like, yeah, something's not right. Now, it's one of those things where, and you got I'm not, it's like playing devil's advocate a little bit, where you um how many times have they had family members saying, "Well, my dad, my parent, they need this, this, and this, and they need pain pills, and they need all this other crap," and and so it's like they really don't know, but they ended up treating them and stuff like that, and that's the thing is like, at the end of the day, they did listen. uh, it took some pushing and some persistence on your part, but that goes right up there with the patient advocacy. Like, how many people would have just been like, okay, well, they're not listening to me. What do I do now? I guess nothing. I guess we can do nothing. No, you don't give up. You keep pushing. You listen. This is a serious issue. He's not eating. He's throwing up. He's running fevers. He's this, and this. This has to change. He wasn't doing this when he was in the hospital. Something has changed. Something is going on, and that's where, yeah, you can definitely put your foot down, and I think you did the right thing with it.
Yeah. But like I said, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I've talked to mostly several patrons and friends of ours who have said that they have since told me, they said everyone that goes into the hospital has to have a patient advocate.
Mhm.
Like, there's got to be that one person, preferably a person who can be there fairly often to like talk to the doctors and get the information straight from them. Like, A person who'd be in the hospital with your family member 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is the perfect situation. It's usually not possible. But, I've been in that situation with dad in the past, like when he had AFib once or twice. And I literally, like, from the time I got to the hospital, I was with him at minimum 20 hours a day until he got released because we didn't know what the situation was, and we didn't know what was going on with his heart. And, in some ways, sometimes that seemed like a more serious situation than this did at the time. Although now looking back in hindsight, I think open heart surgery is kind of the high watermark for serious life situations.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
prior to this, that was the high watermark. So, your perspective changes over time. But
yeah.
I think patient advocate is like it's super important. It's something I never thought of as being super important until I was put in that situation and had to say, okay, somebody's got to talk to the doctors about what's going on, and somebody has to be not only the point of contact to disseminate information back to the family, but somebody has to be the one to stand up for dad
Yeah.
because he can't stand up for himself right now. He doesn't have the energy or, the faculties to tell the doctor, no, you need to stop fooling around. You need to treat this.
Mhm. I mean, that leads into the next topic too, is just what you learned and how you learned what you did, and just like, I mean, you don't know. I mean, I don't know, and you're not claiming to know everything that the doctors and nurses and stuff like that, but by doing research on your own and okay, the symptoms, and I mean that's the thing is like we always make the people we make fun of people that go on Google and they Google their symptoms of okay, what could this be, and oh, they're sick with something else down the road. But Google, like, searching symptoms, searching what could possibly go on or what's possibly happening inside of the human body, like that is, I mean, that's a thing nowadays. Instead of buying medical books online, now we actually have, or not, I mean online, but just instead of having like buying the medical books and medical encyclopedias or whatever you might buy in the past, that hey, this is, or just going off of your gut feeling of what could be happening. But back in the day, it's like, okay, well, how do people recognize like a gallbladder attack before Google, before internet? It's like, well, they just sat home, and once they started feeling pain, they maybe went to the hospital or whatever. But it took somebody recognizing signs and symptoms of something. And so, but now we have the power at our fingertips to where we can say, you know what, this is what's going on. What possibility, what could it be? And it's to help narrow it down. And especially after a major surgery, such as open heart surgery, it's like, okay, is this normal? And you can find a billion different websites that are going to discuss after open heart surgery, what can the patient expect and what side effects could possibly happen.
Yeah, and let me just point something out that I've said before, and it sounds a little antagonistic. It probably is, but it gets the point across. What most of us are now carrying in our pockets, this little chunk of like plastic and maybe some aluminum and lots of little chips and silicon and a lithium battery. This is more freaking data and more information than what you could house in a pretty reasonably sized public library. This is access in our pockets to almost limitless amounts of information. Some of it's junk, some of it's really good stuff, but there is no excuse not to utilize it. So when I say research and be informed, I mean, yeah, there is kind of the old pejorative of the person who says, oh, well, I looked it up on the internet and it says I have this rare disease only 3 people in history have had. I'm going to die tomorrow. Yes, that is kind of a gag or a pejorative for a reason because those people are out there. But when I say research and be informed, I'm talking about like I came home from the hospital and the old man pill calendars that they have, like, Monday, all
Yeah.
the days of the week and so on and so forth. Well, the very first thing I had to do when I got home was I picked up dad's new prescriptions and I had to load those into that thing so that we could keep track of what he was supposed to take when. Because Jesus H, if he didn't have a lot, if he wasn't already on a bunch of medications before all this, he was on a whole bunch afterwards. Well, the first thing I'd do was I had to empty out the pill box, and I've got all these pills in there, and I don't know what they are. I don't know. It's not like they have like little bitty trade names or anything on them. So the very first thing I had to do just to figure out where to put these silly things was I had to get all the big bottles of medication that he was taking, and I looked at the pills. Pro tip: I haven't actually looked because I don't have any veterinary pills lying around I could verify this with, but I don't suspect veterinary pills may or may not have pill codes on them. But every single pharmaceutical sold in the United States of America for human consumption is required by freaking FDA regulations to have a code stamped on it. All of them. It can be numbers and letters. It shouldn't be anything crazy like symbols or anything. It should be numbers and letters. But you can literally take any pill, go get a bottle of Tylenol or aspirin if you don't believe me, and look at what's stamped on the head of that pill. And somewhere, even in addition to the trade name, there should be a code. You can take that code, you can run it through Google and just type in pill code and whatever you find stamped on the pill, and it will tell you exactly what it is. And then you're about a half second away on Google away from knowing exactly what it does after that, what it's used to treat, what possible drug interactions it could have. These were all the things I started doing, was to find out what in the world was this old man taking prior to now, because I didn't know he managed his own care before now. We hadn't had those conversations. Maybe we should have, but we hadn't. But that was like, okay, Nina in the chat saying dog meds do have a code. I thought so, but I didn't have any I don't have doggy aspirin lying around to double check. So I was leaving that as my only escape route of maybe not on veterinary meds, but I mean, it makes sense. You need a way to identify them once they come out the bottle. But the other thing was I was researching what these meds are used for. Cause like, I don't know what any of this nonsense does. And I had to Google it and say, what is this medication used to treat? Just so I get an idea of like, what all are they pumping into dad?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing, and this was actually extremely helpful, was, Andrew, you're probably aware that like acetaminophen and Tylenol are the same freaking thing. One's a trade name, one's a generic name. However, when you have this many medications being administered to a patient and you talk to a lot of different doctors and nurses, you know what tends to happen? You get one doctor uses the trade name and one doctor uses the generic name for the same drug. So if I don't know both those names for every one of those drugs, I can't speak intelligently about what are they taking, because somebody might give the generic name and be like, that doesn't sound familiar. Then they'll give the trade name and I'm like, okay, well, I recognize that. So literally what I did was I made a table on my dad's computer, and then I printed a couple copies of it. And that table had the generic name, the trade name, the dosing schedule, and then a big notes block, which was like what it's used for, special instructions from the doctor that recommended it, discussions about like what symptoms we were seeing that caused that to be recommended, and like all this information was recorded. That's the thing. A lot of what I did was my own research so that I could speak intelligently about these medications, so that I knew what they were used for. I knew potential drug interactions to watch out for. By the way, his pharmacy was also freaking amazing about warning me in advance, because there's a medication he used to be administered prior to all this that he hasn't been on in a while. But they were very quick to point out that two of the medications he'd been recently prescribed had a near fatal interaction with that one. So they told me, if I filled these for you, you cannot let him take that other med. And guess what? Day one, when we brought him into the hospital into the emergency room for the gallbladder, what wound up being the gallbladder surgery, they tried to give him that med. I caught it and he caught it. And we both said, no, can't have that. And it was fine. But like we just got into the emergency room. He had a little bit of, I think he had a little bit of he had a history of AFib. So they were trying to treat him with something to make sure he didn't go into AFib. But that something was something his cardiologist had taken him off of,
Right.
Specifically because it has drug interactions with so many other medications. So anyway, my point is like, be very informed and very cognizant. Do all of your own research. Do not be afraid to get on Google and look like a rube Googling stuff on the internet. You want to be intimately familiar with what is going on with your patient. You want to know what medications are being administered. You want to know why they're being administered, what they're supposed to fix. You want to know what side effects are possible. Every bit of that has to be part of this discussion. Because, yes, in a perfect world, you could hand your loved one off to a doctor and say, make them feel better. And that would happen 100% of the time. And then we wouldn't have medical malpractice suits and insurance, and doctors wouldn't get sued for screwing up, and they wouldn't lose patients ever. But that's not reality. So the truth of the matter is that what you are there to do is to be an informed third party, to double check, to make sure things are being dealt with appropriately. And you cannot be an informed third party if you don't do your own research.
Yep.
Just, yep. Last one, stress management. I suck at this. People that have
Yeah.
watched this show for a lot, yeah, Andrew is like, yes, you suck at this. But like people that have watched this show for a while, friends of mine, patrons, family members, Andrew, my wife, for God's sakes, everybody knows I suck at stress management. I am a full blast 210% type A personality. I like wake up in the morning, shotgun 4 cups coffee, and put the pedal to the floor and go full speed all day until I run out of gas. And that is my personality. I am super intense, and I don't give up, and I don't crack, and I don't. I am that person that goes hard all the time because it is the only way I know how to be, especially when something's important to me. I don't do halfway very well. And that personality was very detrimental to me in this position because there were times when there was nothing I could do, like there were times when I had downtime and I had to force myself to stop and eat a sandwich because I just wasn't hungry. I thought I lost weight during all this. I didn't lose as much as I thought I did, but like my body weight did drop just a touch, which, I mean, probably in hindsight wasn't a horrible thing because I'm kind of a fluffy prepper, but it was evidence of the fact that my stress was getting to me. I wasn't doing with myself what I normally would. I was pretty much eating because I was just forcing myself to because I knew I needed to. Um, was not sleeping well. I was having nightmares, waking up 2, 3 times every night. That has gotten better, but it's still not great. Like even last night, I woke up twice in the middle of the night for no reason. I was able to go back to sleep, but I know it's stress, and knowing it's stress does not make it any easier to deal with. But, it was super important that I at least schedule appropriate time to sleep. You know what I'm saying? Like when I was staying with my parents during the kind of the worst of all this, I was going to bed earlier than I usually do.
Hmm.
I was asleep by 9:30, 10 o'clock most nights. And that's like kind of the earliest I go to sleep when I'm here at home. But over there, I was going to sleep early. I was waking up at 7:30, 8 o'clock most mornings, unless I got woke up in the middle of the night for an emergency. But, I was trying to make that extra time to sleep. I can't nap during the day. It's just once I wake up, I'm done. I was encouraging my mother to take naps during the day, though, to kind of keep her own strength up and de stress. Not very good at it. I look for those little opportunities I could, like, sit out on the back porch and have a cigar, or talk to friends, talk to my wife, something to just be able to unload every now and then so it didn't eat me. And, Andrew tells me all the freaking time about the 3 foot world, and I hate it when he brings it up because I want
You,
to slap the shit out of him.
because it's a fact. It's true. It.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, 3 foot world, for those of you who are not indoctrinated into it, you freaking sadists, is the idea that like you control what's within your grasp, and then if it's not within your control, you have to let it go and not let it eat at you. And
Yeah.
I
It's
suck at that.
it's human nature to worry. It's human nature to stress. It's human nature to worry about the what ifs. I mean, especially with everything going on with your dad. It's okay, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if? And it'll eat you alive. But at the same time, going back to the 3 foot world, and for those of you, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I know, I agree with you. Easier said than done. I understand that.
Hoya.
It is. It's easier said than done. But the 3 foot world, the concept comes from. I first heard about it from. It's a book called No Hero, I think it was. I think it was No Hero, from a author named Mark Owen. He's written a couple different books, but he's a former SEAL, stuff like that, and he talks about the 3 foot world and what the concept, that how he got it and stuff like that. And yeah, it's you take the worries, like you're gonna have stresses. I have stresses. I have worries. I have the what ifs and stuff like that. But you take things that you cannot control and you try to put them out of your mind. You try to put them on the back burner, because at the end of the day, I can't worry about the snow coming. It's out of my control. Now, when it gets here, what's in my control is I can drive safe. I can try to leave earlier for work. I can get up and I can shower and I can leave for half hour earlier, and that's within my control. The person driving next to me, that's out of my control. Your dad, I mean, you being an advocate for your dad, that's within your control. You helping him with his medications, his food, helping them get around the house, that's within your control. It's out of your control of what ultimately of what the doctors do, and how his health goes is out of your control. Granted, you're not going to stop stressing about it because it's your dad, but the 3 foot world, it serves a purpose, and honestly, like it's helped me out a lot, of just letting certain things go. And granted, it's harder for some people, but if you can kind of, you got to kind of push yourself into doing it. Like stop, like it's easy to say stop stressing. It's hard to stop stressing, but it's not good for you to stress. It's not, and you stressing over it is, or you stressing yourself crazy over something is not helping the situation at all. It's not helping your health, obviously, since you're not eating properly, stuff like that. It's not helping your family, because your stress, your daughter picks up on the stress, your wife picks up on the stress, and then that in turn, it all snowballs. And so that, and that's where I was like, and I know I'm in Michigan, you're in Louisiana, and me saying, hey, don't stress about it, it doesn't help anything. But I'm trying to remind you, like, you got to let some stuff go. Like, there's some things that you got to let go. Like, you cannot control it. It is out of your control.
Yeah. And believe it or not, it is more helpful than you realize because, you know, the one bullet point I didn't preload into this was just having a support group because, I tend to have a very small friend group. A lot of that's because sometimes I'm the biggest a hole in the face of the earth, and I don't blame people for not wanting to hang out with me. But a lot of it's just the fact that like I'm not a very trusting person. I keep a very tight friend circle. I expect a lot of the people that I keep around me, and a lot of people don't live up to that. And I just assume have no friends than friends I don't feel like I can count on. That sounds harsh, but I mean the people that truly get me kind of understand where I'm coming from. But that group of people that I've been able to vent to and have been checking on me have been very, very instrumental in helping me to emotionally deal with the stress and get through it so that I had more to give back to my own family. It's just, it's one of those things where, like, throughout this whole thing, there is no part of this that is easy. There's
Mhm.
no part of this that's even the stuff that sounds simple. It's simple to say, it's not simple to pull off. But like, I thought it merited having a conversation about it because, like, given that I am semi notorious for having kind of a distrust of big pharma and the health community at large, which I'm very quick to point out that does not extend to individual healthcare providers or employees. Like, we have friends who are nurses and paramedics and everything, and I would like hand any one of them a scalpel and say, "Cut me open, have a party." I trust them intrinsically. They're friends of mine. But I think that they work in a system that sometimes gets caught in its own bureaucracy. Kind of like a lot of my comparisons with like individual sheriff's deputies or police officers and then the law enforcement community at broad. You
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? Like, I'm very critical of law enforcement at the large scale. I think they have issues with corruption. I think they have issues with bad cops keeping their jobs. I think they have all kinds of issues that need to get fixed. But when you get down to like the individual law enforcement officers, I'm like, as long as you're trying to do the right thing and you're not trying to freaking screw anybody over, like I'm sympathetic to the fact that you're tangled up in a bureaucracy because you're trying to do a good thing, but you're tangled up in a bureaucracy that doesn't always want to do the right thing.
Hmm.
And I look at healthcare a lot the same way. I'm very distrusting of big hospital systems. I'm very distrustful of a lot of doctors. I'm intensely distrustful of big pharma because I think that curing your cash cow is kind of is not as much of a priority as selling them as product or a service. But that's just me. But I'm that person, guys. And so shouldn't be a huge shock to anybody that I was wanting to be involved in this as more than just a bystander. I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to understand it. And I wanted to make sure that my father was getting the care I felt like he deserved.
Yeah.
And the hard part about this whole thing has just been that uh, I don't think there's anything you can do to get ready for a situation like this, which kind of sounds like an offhand dismissal because, like, we say the same thing about natural disasters. Hurricane, I had to drop two trees on my house and one in the front yard. Nothing I could have done to get ready for that. You just wake up, you look at the pile of suck in front of you, and you start figuring out how to unwind it. And
But
that's
that
kind of this.
but that also that ties into your 3 foot world as well. I mean, in the 3 foot world, it ties into prepping, and because you can't you have you worrying about a hurricane, it does nothing. It's gonna you worrying about the hurricane is going to again worry your kid, worry your wife, the other family, neighbors, friends, whatever. It's gonna put the worry on them too. But what you can control is getting ready for that event, ready for that hurricane. You can get your things gassed up. You can get extra fuel. You can get your batteries charged. You can get make sure your chainsaw's ready to go. You can make sure all this the preparedness side of everything. You can that's within your 3 foot world. Stuff with your dad. I mean, granted, we don't have control. I mean, we have control to a certain point about over our health, but if tomorrow I get in a car wreck or if I have a stroke or if I have a heart attack or something happens to me tomorrow health wise, I have it's within my world to exercise and try to eat healthy and do all this other crap to try to mitigate that stuff. But at the end of the day, if it's my time to have a heart attack and kick over, then it's my time. At the end of the day, it's like you don't have control over that. But just do what you can, and that's the thing is I mean, it might sound morbid, but we all die. That's the one thing that I mean, what's the saying? There's only two things that are certain in this world, it's death and taxes. I mean, we all end up in the same place. Uh, it's just a matter of, you know, how we get there, I guess, and what when we get there. But I mean, control what you can. And that's the thing is the 3 foot world. That's why I push that on you so much. Is because it goes into prepping.
I'm sure some of it is that you enjoy needling me.
Well, that too.
That is some component of this conversation, I'm sure. But yeah, that's that was kind of what I thought would merit talking about at this point. I needed a minute. I needed a minute after the first hospital visit to decompress, and I didn't get it because we had to go a second time.
Hmm.
So like here we are. I'm just got to get it off my chest and got to have a conversation with you and with the listeners and just be like, God, I hope none of y'all are ever in this situation where you have to be patient advocate and everything else.
Hmm.
But if you are, like, the best advice I can give you is that, you have to understand that your yes, your doctor, the doctors, the nurses, the hospital staff, the whatever, their job is to get your loved one well. But no one is ever going to fight as hard for your family member as you will. And when your family member needs you, when they're sick, when they're in trouble, when they're in the emergency room, brothers and sisters, y'all need to fight like the third monkey on the ramp of the ark because No one's going to fight harder for you than you. No one's going to fight harder for your loved one than you will. So if you just kind of sit back as a spectator and put all your faith and hope in doctors without ever asking yourself, what else, what if I'd taken a more active role in this? What if I'd researched? What if I'd been an advocate? Like, I don't want anybody to have that experience where they have that regret and think, is there something I could have done? But I also want people to understand that, you know, in even with the best doctors and nurses and, surgeons on the planet, and most of them are right here in the US, thankfully, everyone's human. Everyone's capable of making a mistake. Everyone's capable of missing something. Everyone's capable of administering the wrong med. Everyone's capable of overlooking a symptom. So by you voluntarily being that extra set of eyes in the room, the extra person recording data points, the extra person watching the symptoms, you could you could have a positive influence in your patient's care. You just have to understand up front that the only way you do that is by trying to manage your patient's care, trying to manage your stress, and by being informed. And all that's within everybody's control. I mean, like 50 years ago, you had to go to school for a long time to get 1/10 the information that's sitting there on your phone, on the other side of your cell phone, just waiting to Google something. And I mean, people can kind of sneer at it if you want. I refer to it as Google Fu, like Kung Fu, or Google U, Google University. But I'm going to tell you right here and now, and this would probably be a really good conversation to get my wife involved in the future. But when my wife and I first became parents, when we brought this gorgeous little girl home and we had no freaking idea what we were doing because we were first time parents, and everybody's first time parent knows what I'm talking about. You bring this tiny little screaming human home, you have no freaking clue what to do with them, and you don't know how to make them stop screaming, first of all. And they don't come with instruction manuals or reset buttons. So if you screw up, it's kind of permanent. And my wife and I were Googling stuff. Like, it sounds funny. Like, we laugh about it now, but like looking back at it, we were like, baby will not stop screaming at 2 o'clock in the morning. And we were Googling stuff because we didn't freaking know. We had to figure it out. And that's why I tell everybody, I'm like, in this day and age, there's no excuse for being uninformed. There's no excuse for being uneducated. Like, if you can get on the internet, you can learn stuff that would have taken other people 50 years ago a lifetime to learn, and it's just right there. And especially in this situation, the best thing you can do is just push yourself to be as informed as possible so that you can try to be a good influence in that patient's care. And yes, Lewis is seconding what my sentiment was. That is going to be a whole conversation to have at a later date because first time parent stuff is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure most people would voluntarily become celibate if like they had to listen to me recount some of the stuff we went through that first year of Piper's life.
I mean, yeah.
Dude, I got pooped on.
Yeah.
On my chest.
And that's the end of the show right there, fellas.
Every parent's had that experience. We'll get into that in another episode. But thanks, Andrew, for letting me decompress, and thanks for helping. Just being there for me and being there to go to bat when I needed you. And thanks, man. You're more than a co-host. You're a friend. I do appreciate that.
Appreciate it. Yeah. No, I'm glad I could help from all the very distance that I'm away. But yeah, no, hopefully things go up. So
I hope so. But Matter of Fact's podcast heading out the door. Talk to y'all later, guys.
bye.